Welcome, everyone. We will go ahead and get started with our webinar today to discuss engaging with communities through economic development and entrepreneurship-related activities, particularly focusing on public-private partnership models. My name is Jason Jolly, and I'm a faculty member here at the Voinovich School of Leadership and Public Service, and I also direct the Master of Public Administration program. I'm pleased to be joined by our Dean, Mark Weinberg, and I will introduce Dean Weinberg here momentarily. But first, let's walk through a few brief housekeeping items. All of the attendees are automatically muted when you join. We ask that you leave yourself muted during the presentation. We do look forward to hearing from you during what we hope is a robust question and answer segment. So during that time, feel free to type any questions or comments into the chat and or raise your hand, and you can speak when we get to the Q&A section. The raise your hand is located in the reaction section of the toolbar, and there's also a shortcut available of the Alt key plus Y. If you are dialing in, you can please use the *9 on your keypad to raise and lower your hand. We do encourage you to use the chat throughout the session, and we welcome you to submit questions as we go along. It would be great if you are joining us and you were able to introduce yourself in the chat by putting in your name and your organization. The session is being recorded, and we are asking, and all registrants will receive a recording email link, so that should be coming to your email soon after the presentation. Though we're going to start off by hearing from Mark Weinberg. Dr. Weinberg is the founding dean of the Voinovich School. I would consider Dean Weinberg really to be the architect for everything that we do. He began the organization many years ago with a small number of employees, and as he tells me, in a basement of a building that no longer exists here on campus. And he has grown into what I think is one of the premier public service schools in the entire country. And he's going to talk about our work, much of our collective impact, and a little bit about the legacy of Senator George Voinovich. The school is named after Senator Voinovich. So Dean Weinberg, I'll turn it over to you and let you get started, and then I'll join in a little bit later.
Okay, thank you, Professor Jolly. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Mark Weinberg, as Jason Jolly mentioned, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Voinovich School and talk about the Voinovich School in terms of how we're structured, which is a public-private partnership. And then, since the focus today is on economic development and entrepreneurship, I'm going to give 3 examples of how we actually engage in entrepreneurial innovation across 3 different sectors: the business sector, which is somewhat unusual for public service colleges, nonprofits, and government, which is much more typical. The school was founded about 10 years ago. It's named after former Senator, Governor, and Mayor George Voinovich. He was a 1958 graduate of Ohio University. And on the slide, you can see that this is probably one of his favorite sayings, which I believe the government's highest calling is to empower people and galvanize their energy and resources to help solve our problems, meet our challenges, and seize our opportunities. And this isn't a mission statement so much, it's sort of a value statement about what the school is about. And there's a lot of members from ASPA and who are going to be familiar with Senator and Governor Voinovich. He was a great public servant for 44 years and was one of the public servants that we're missing these days, who was really thought tremendously of public servants. Now I'm going to see if I can actually get to, okay. There we go, I get it. So this is a little bit of a background on the school. We're about 10 years old, as I mentioned. One of the things that all public affairs and public service schools do is they look at U.S. News and World Report rankings. When we first started out in around 2014, when I was appointed dean, we were about 136th, and we've moved up to 64th, little down from last year. And then this is some of the examples of some of the national rankings that we were participating in relationship to the school. It's sort of an overview. So we as Jason Jolly said, we've come a long way in a fairly short period of time. And then one of the things that we do, one of our focuses is on economic development and entrepreneurship. And these are really statistics or metrics related to business entrepreneurship. We're a little different than a traditional public affairs school because we operate, as well as professional degrees, a number of state and regional programs. One of those, and we've had a huge amount of impact in terms of indirect or direct economic activity. This is a true figure. It's about $3.5 billion that we've influenced in economic activity over the last 5 years. A lot of this comes from the fact that now we run the state's procurement program. And generates contracts with the federal government. When we took the program over about 5 years ago, the state was receiving about $250 million a year in terms of contracts. We've grown that program to be about over $1 billion a year. And then one of the most unusual things we've done is we operate a 20-county technology commercialization partnership for the state of Ohio, which is very unusual for a public service organization. And we've, over the last 10 years that we've done this, we've helped generate about almost $750 million in terms of economic venture capital investment in the region. So there's a lot that we're doing in terms of business and entrepreneurial development. And then Dr. Jolly is going to talk a little bit more about the work that we're doing in economic development through our partnerships with the Economic Development Administration and Appalachian Regional Commission. And then we have worked with our Board of Regents and State Department of Higher Education to develop an actual targeted strategy to improve the economy of the entire region. That's been pretty successful and helped drive this forward. Okay. I don't quite understand what this is. Oops. Okay. The school was set up because of the nature of its mission as a partnership. As our mission is fairly similar to other types of professional colleges and units. We focus on public service outreach, professional executive education and training, applied learning and scholarship. All of the students that are with us are integrated into different types of project work. And we work on work through partnerships at the region and state level. One of the things that was unusual, and this is the way we were set up, is that we don't have departments or divisions. We were set up as a series of program partnerships. So instead of having a Department of Public Administration, we have a Public Administration program. We have partnerships in things like community prevention of suicide and addiction problems and other kinds of things. And we operate not as a college per se, but as a higher education public-private partnership. And our strategy is that we advocate for the region and the state. We actually make targeted investments, and then we impact different types of critical issues. Sector development, we work across the nonprofit sector, government sector, and business sector, and then focus on education and leadership. I'm going to end with giving 3 examples of, since the topic today is entrepreneurship, on entrepreneurial innovation. And I picked 3 examples that are very, very different, but our approach is the same. One is an example, which is a new Appalachian law enforcement initiative. This program was an idea that the former director of the Department of Public Safety for the state had, who grew up in this region, to start to do something that could be training in a rural area that would work towards de-escalation of techniques when law enforcement officers dealt with a violent situation. We worked with law enforcement officials throughout the region and increasingly in the state, and with our College of Communications, which has a virtual reality technology. And we put together a new training program related to that we launched about 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's a virtual training. I got a chance to go through one of the very difficult training issues last week. And our goal in terms of innovation is to not only deal with this at the law enforcement at the regional level, but there's a lot of interest now from the governor, lieutenant governor, and the attorney general of taking this to be statewide. So this is an example of entrepreneurial innovation. It's focused on government, which is a source of great innovation throughout the United States, especially at the state and local level, and increasingly at the federal level. And it's an example of how our college works. A second example is a nonprofit. All right, there's another nonprofit called Building Bridges to Careers. It is a program that started in a single county. It fosters school, business, and civic relationships to improve career choice for students, especially in terms of entrepreneurial companies. And one of the things that we did was we worked with this nonprofit, just as we work with the law enforcement initiative the last 2 to 3 years. And we've invested intensive services to the group, actually made investment of dollars, and we've built their capability. And one of the things that we've done is we've helped them scale up from a single county to 24 counties in Southeast Ohio. And this year they were recognized as a leading program like this in the state. So it's a nonprofit, it's building bridges to careers. It's very different than working with governmental entities, but the general approach we take as a public-private partnership and the way our college works is the same thing. The last example that I'm going to talk about, which is a little unusual, but we're becoming, it's been pretty famous, is we've, as I mentioned, we've spent a long time building a venture capital capability. And through innovative state program for about the last 10 years. And we have something called Tech Growth Ohio. And one of the companies that we've worked on, which is in the Plains, Ohio, which is a small community outside of Athens, is called Sterling Ultra Cold. And they have really taken off in the last couple of years. And a couple of things happened. One is that we helped them essentially develop a marketing and strategy to development of ultra cold low freezers. And two things of interest that happened. One is they merged this year with a national company called BioLife Solutions. And that's the largest ever merger and exit in Southeast Ohio history. It's also led to a creation of 170 high-paying jobs in the Plains, Ohio. And what's really notable and why we've gotten a lot of national press on this is that the company makes small and large freezers that store the COVID-19 vaccines. So needless to say, they're working 24-hour shifts and having trouble in terms of expansion. But in each case, whether we're working with Sterling Ultra Cold, or working with Building Bridges to Careers, or working with law enforcement agencies, we take an entrepreneurial innovation approach, and we pretty much do the same thing. We work with the company in terms of intensive services or the nonprofit. We actually make investments in the entities, and then we help build their capacity to scale up. And that's sort of one of the key components of how we approach pretty much every issue for the college.
Thank you, Dean Weinberg. All right, I apologize, the little delay on clicking the slides here and getting those advanced. I just have a few slides left, and then what we would like to do is engage in some Q&A with the audience. So again, if you can put any questions you have in the chat, that would be great, but we'll also be happy to take questions by you raising your hand as well. Here at the school, I manage much of our economic development portfolio. We are a longtime partner with Bowling Green State University and something called the Rural Universities Consortium University Center. The U.S. Economic Development Administration designates university centers across the country. Each university center engages in a variety of activities, and sometimes they're very different depending on the university center and the geography in which they operate. We have been a university center for 25 years. We are just finishing up our 25th year as a university center this month. And we've been renewed by the US EDA for 5 more years to continue as an Economic Development Administration University Center. Because we are a university center, we provide a great deal of service, small research projects, strategic plans, economic impact analyses, to our partners across the 32 county Appalachian, Ohio region, which is our footprint of service here at Ohio University for the University Center. And our colleagues at Bowling Green serve 29 counties in Northwest Ohio. Between the two of us, we have a pretty substantial coverage of the state. Through those relationships and working with communities around Appalachia, we often are partnering with folks on economic development projects. And I want to talk about two very large projects and how we engaged in public-private partnerships with our economic development districts, which are governmental, they're partners who work as regional planning organizations in the Appalachian, Ohio region. So the first one is a $2 million project called the Bobcat Network. We are the Ohio Bobcats. And so this acronym I came up with, and I think it's more clever than most of my colleagues think. But it stands for Building Opportunities Beyond Coal, Accelerating Transition. And we created a project called the Bobcat Network Project, which was funded through $1.6 million in funding through the US EDA. And it required a 20% match under EDA's Assistance to Coal Communities program. And Dean Weinberg agreed to provide $400,000 in match through our state appropriation. We're very fortunate in that we have a designated state appropriation called the Appalachian New Economy Partnership. The Appalachian New Economy Partnership is used to support work that the school pursues to help the economy here in the Appalachian, Ohio region. So we actually brought all of the match funding to the table, or nearly all of it. Our partners at OVRDC brought a little bit of match money to the table, but most of it came through ANEP, the Appalachian New Economy Partnership. This project is designed to assist a region in Southern Ohio where there are 2 coal-fired power plant closures in Adams County, which is an economically distressed county designated as a distressed county under the Appalachian Regional Commission's designation criteria. We did some economic impact modeling. In total, about 1,100 lost jobs across the region as a result of this closure, and about $8 million in local tax base that was lost in this county. Ohio still uses tangible personal property tax for public utilities. It's one of the few organizations or activities that still pay the tangible personal property tax if you're a utility. And because of that, and the fact that these power plants are no longer going to produce power, there's a substantial tax base loss in these communities. So to give some perspective, the schools lost a half to 2/3 of their funding. The county lost about 10% of its general fund. Here in Ohio, we have property tax levies to support many activities. So senior activities, developmental disabilities, board, other organizations like that, ambulatory services, those organizations were losing something like 15 to 25, even as much as 1/3 of their budget as a result of these power plant closures. So it's a really challenging environment in which to work because there's not an economic development solution given the tax base structure that will come in and make up that tax base. So we partnered with the Ohio Valley Regional Development Commission. We have been working for almost 3 years. We're going to be concluding this project in December with these communities. We actually have embedded 2 employees of the school in the region working in local economic development offices. We hired economic recovery coordinators who've been working with the community and helped them secure a large grant to help build out their industrial park as a way to diversify their economy. So this is really, on the ground, nuts and bolts economic development work in support of these local economic developers in these communities where they really don't have a lot of capacity. It's usually about a 1-person shop. And as a follow-up to the Bobcat Network project and the success that we've had there, there has been another power plant closure in Coshocton, Ohio, which is in eastern Ohio. And we followed a similar blueprint, working in partnership again with some of our rural economic development organizational partners, the Ohio Mid-Eastern Governments Association and the Buckeye Hills Regional Council. OVRDC, Ohio Valley Regional Development Commission, and these other two organizations are all federally designated economic development districts. So we partner with those folks. And again, they did not have match funding to bring to the table to pursue EDA funding. We provided through the school state appropriation $300,000 in match support for this project. And we were able to partner with Jobs Ohio, which is the state's private economic development entity, to get match support from them. Jobs Ohio provided $250,000 in match support. In total, we were able to secure $2.2 million in EDA funding. And as part of this project, we're working to build out opportunity zones in the region, help the opportunity zones that are really investment ready, with putting together final touches on a prospectus, working on pro formas and other types of technical and legal consulting for those that are really at the investable stage. But there are also many communities where they just need economic development planning to help think about what they can pursue with their opportunity zones. We are also have embedded an employee in the Coshocton Economic Development Office as well. So really, you think of us as a public affairs school, but we have employees working directly on behalf of communities, and they're embedded in those communities where they're working. And I think that's very important because working in a rural region, we want to ensure that the resources are not just flowing to Ohio University and not just flowing to Athens, where we're located as a main campus, but also to communities throughout the region where there is a clear need. So along those lines, the last slide here before we take questions in chat, based on our experience, I wanted to share what I think are some do's and don'ts as it relates to best practices in university partnerships. The first one is really share resources and engage in joint leveraging of investments. Only through our willingness to share the state appropriation dollars that are flowing to our school were we able to leverage on an 80-20 match the EDA funding that we brought into the region. Had we pursued this solely as a university project without partners, one, we would not have been successful. And then two, even if we had been successful, we would not have been able to create the impact that we've created by going at it alone rather than partnering with our communities. The second thing is engage the communities in the development of the initiatives. This sounds simple. My experience has been that many times academicians and faculty think that they are engaging communities in joint development, but really they're sort of riding on high from the ivory tower and coming down with a set of activities. The way that we engage the communities where we're working for these two EDA projects in particular, we asked the communities, what do you want to do? And they gave us a wish list. We worked with the Economic Development Administration, and we said, we're submitting a proposal. These are some things we want to do. Some of the things didn't fit the parameters of the notice of federal funding. Some of the ideas had to be reframed to better fit the federal funding priorities. And then others were just a perfect match for something that EDA might consider. I will say one thing about the U.S. Economic Development Administration, having worked with them for a long time. We also view them as a partner. If you look at your federal organizations, whether it be SBA or EDA or the Appalachian Regional Commission, we work with all three of them, as well as others, the Department of Energy. We see those federal funding, those federal agencies as partners and not just as funders for our work. So I think that is critically important to think about that, because if you see these folks as just people who are going to fund your activities, I think that's being short-sighted, and you're not fully leveraging their ability to at least advise you on the pre-proposal stage and help you think about how you can better shape your initiatives. A third principle I would say is to share the marquee. We clearly want to ensure that we are sharing the marquee with our partners, regardless of whether or not they have any financial resources to bring to the table. And if you're working in rural and distressed communities, they often don't. But we want to share the marquee with them and ensure that they also get credit for the work that they're putting in. And you can think of this in some ways as, I think of it like sweat equity. These folks are working very hard in these communities where they often don't have a lot of capacity. They don't have to often have a lot of resources, but they are also bringing their work to the table. And it's important to share the marquee so that it's not just Ohio University, but it's Ohio University, the Ohio Valley Regional Development Commission, the counties in which we're working, that everybody gets an opportunity to demonstrate the work that they're doing on behalf of their respective communities. Another practice is to engage students. Part of the ways that we were able to provide some match support was that we use graduate assistants and we use their tuition waiver. We actually have a couple of graduate assistants, or actually their former graduate assistants on the call. I'm looking at the participant list here. And there's great benefit to that. One, we're able to bring fairly low cost labor because graduate students are not particularly expensive. They are, if you count, the loaded rates of tuition waivers and those kinds of things, but we're willing to bear that cost. But the hourly rate is not great for grad students. So we're able to bring young, talented, eager students to work on behalf of the region. And it has a great benefit. One, the region gets capacity that it didn't otherwise have. But two, what we found is for a region like ours that is often losing talent to urban areas, or even in the state of Ohio, sometimes losing talent to other states, this has created economic opportunity for students to find employment. So we have a great track record of placing our students in gainful employment post-graduation with many of the partners where we are working. I was on a call for one of our projects the other day, and 3 former students who've come through our MPA program were on the call, all of whom had gotten jobs with either local economic development organizations, regional organizations, or a state organization. And then lastly, I would say it's important not just to create these partnerships, but to sustain the partnerships. And this will go a little bit to what I think are some of the don'ts when it relates to partnering. It's often easy to create things, but very challenging to sustain those over the long term. We are an anchor institution here in the Appalachian Ohio region, and we want to continue those partnerships and see them be sustained and successful over the long term. And that means you have to be able to work with different partners who often maybe have different goals or missions than we have, and figure out ways to ensure that everyone is having their needs met through whatever initiative that you're pursuing. A couple of don'ts. One of the things that frustrates me to no end when I hear people talk about working in rural places, particularly the communities where I work, just viewing the partners as a research laboratory. And going into those communities and extracting the data that one needs, whether it be interviews or surveys or whatever it is, publish it in an academic article, and then kind of leave the rest. I don't think that's a particularly good model for universities to engage in, particularly in the communities in which they are trying to build partnerships and in the communities in which they live and work. So, we publish often the work that we do because we think it's important to inform practice in public affairs, particularly for community engagement. We think it's important to try and inform the broader rural economic development community, which is the area in which I'm working in my more scholarly activities, as well as the applied work that I do here. But we don't view our partners as a research laboratory, that we're just going to go in, get what we need, and then move along. We view these, again, as long-term sustained partnerships. And I think it takes a long time to build trust often when universities go into communities. We are fortunate that we have the reputation here at the school that we have, and we built that over a long term. And folks are willing to call us and engage with us because they know we're not just trying to extract something from them. We also have something that we want to give them in return. So I think that's very important, particularly when you're working in communities which perhaps there's a lot of underserved individuals, whether it be rural or urban, that you're seen as being someone who's giving something and not just taking. So this is our last slide. So I want to thank everyone for being here with us today. And we wanted to see what questions you may have of us, comments, perspectives. And Happy to see folks either raise their hand and I can unmute you and you can turn the camera on, or put the information in the chat. So with that, Dean Weinberg, do you have any parting thoughts before we go to the questions?
Yeah, I do, but I'll wait till we get to questions. I was thinking about something completely different.
Okay.
One of the issues that I think we faced, which is listening to what Jason was saying, is that we're all essentially, most of us are, almost all of us are working in universities or in the public sector, and we're providing leadership in areas. And I think one of the issues that's sort of related to this session is how do we basically take leadership in moving everything forward and getting people to understand the important work that universities and various levels of government and nonprofits are doing. So not quite related, but I was thinking about it as you were talking.
So what questions do folks have? Again, please put those in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, I will do my best to call on you. No, I don't see everyone on the screen at once, so I'm just sort of scrolling to make sure I haven't missed anyone here. I do see a question, Dean Weinberg, that came through direct message to me rather than to everyone. And perhaps you can help me with this. One of the questions, the question that's was asked here is, can we talk about other partnerships that we might have, and who are our other partners? You know, I mentioned the Department of Energy. We have some work that we're doing there, US EDA. You know, maybe you could talk a little bit about some of our state partners. We certainly have a lot of partners at the school. You're muted.
Zoom. So to give you a big overview, we've just had installed a new president about 2 weeks ago. He was talking about one of his 5 priorities is service to the state and the region. And he talked about the Voinovich School, and he used the term 150. So we have about 150 partnerships, okay, give or take 10 or 15. Some of them are fairly small, and a lot of them are major. Okay, and it becomes a challenge in working through this component. But I'll give you some examples. So when we created a partnership because related to what Jason was saying is that when we think about what it is we're doing, we're trying to not think about it as a university approach, but as an approach that we're partnering and actually doing things together jointly with people outside of the university or inside the university. So one of the things that we've done a lot of work on over the years was in children and family well-being. So, and that's been with state agencies, with the Children's Trust Fund, with multiple entities. So when we restructured how we were doing it, we moved away from sort of having a technical unit that works with people, and we created a partnership for children and family. So one of the biggest partners that's happened in the last couple of years is there's something called the Appalachian Children's Coalition. So we're actually working with that entity and actually funding the entity that we're working with to expand and advocate on behalf of children in the region. Another program that we've had for maybe 10 years, we work with Ohio has something called the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. And then through them and then through 2 federal agencies, which are HRSA and SAMHSA, which don't ask me what that stands for, but I know the initials. We've done a lot of work in terms of building partnerships around prevention of suicide, drug and alcohol addiction. And we've worked with communities around the state, about 65 communities to form coalitions. And then we've actually integrated that into our academy training. So we do a lot of work in terms of community-based prevention, huge partnerships in children and families. We've talked about sort of some of the economic development and the entrepreneurship partnerships. And then I guess another example that I would give, I'm fresh on this because I had the appropriations that Jason Jolly talked about. We had a tough time in the governor's budget, and so we had to do 25 legislative meetings. So I'm pretty fresh on talking about these partnerships. But one of them we've had a long-term partnership with this group called the Mayor's Partnership for Progress, which is now most of the region, that covers 750,000 people and about 72 municipalities. So the last year or two, we're looking at how we expand the types of services that we're providing, working through their 501c3. So local government, which is pretty traditional, children and families, community prevention. We've had a long-term partnership in terms of stream restoration. And then we just formed a partnership. A huge issue nationally in our state and region is the water quality, the availability of quality water to people. And so we've developed with multiple partners a database to start to look at, to get a handle on who has access to clean drinking water, which is pretty amazing. That something like 40% of the people in our region and statewide have trouble in terms of drinking water. So I could go on for a long time, but those are some key examples of the partnerships, and we almost do everything that way.
So thank you, Dean Weinberg. I see that there was a question about the work that we're doing in sanitation, but I think that came in and you actually wound up addressing some of that. There was another question that came by direct message to me. And I think I can tackle this one, but you feel free to jump in. How do the partnerships please talk a little bit more about how the partnerships intersect with your professional education mission. So one thing that I did not have a slide about, but I think is relevant here. We have a longstanding partnership with the Ohio Economic Development Association. The Ohio Economic Development Association is the professional association for economic developers here in the state of Ohio. They went through a competitive process about 5 years ago, and we were selected as their educational partner. And so the Ohio Economic Development Association, the Voinovich School here at Ohio University, and Jobs Ohio, our private sector partner, private sector economic development organization here in Ohio, created something called the Ohio Economic Development Institute. And the Ohio Economic Development Institute offers a series of training courses to economic developers and others. You don't have to be an economic developer in the state of Ohio. So we teach courses on traditional economic development activities such as site selection and development, finance and incentives, real estate, business retention and expansion, workforce development. But we also teach other specialized courses like economic impact analysis, fiscal impact analysis, things around utilities and economic development. And students who want to take courses can just take them if they like, if they're interested in a particular topic. But we have also created a certification program through the Institute. So we have certified, I think, about 30 students, and we have 30 more, or actually 40 students, and we have 30 more who are joining a cohort this year. And they'll be presenting and working on a capstone project. So, for example, perhaps creating a downtown redevelopment plan for their community, or looking at a workforce training plan for a major employer. And so we'll be working with these economic developers here in Ohio, working in communities on creating some sort of strategy to help their community on whatever the particular initiative is. So it's really a way in which I think we are married the activities and the expertise we have as a school with some of that professional education. The other thing, and I believe Dean Weinberg mentioned this, but it's worth noting again, he mentioned that we don't have departments, but we're also different in that we have about 10 faculty here at the school, and the 10 faculty are 12-month appointments. So unlike more traditional faculty who are 9-month appointments, we're operating a bit more like maybe a med school or a clinical faculty, 12-month appointments. And then we have about 80 or 90, every time I turn around the number grows because we have so much going on, 80 or 90 professional staff working on and leading initiatives. So the way in which we evaluate our faculty for promotion and tenure, the way that we make faculty hiring decisions, really is about someone's ability to come in and engage in the public service work that we do in partnership with communities. And so success here is not defined by publishing a university press book. Success is defined by creating and sustaining partnerships in whatever one's area of expertise is, and growing and enhancing that capacity within the region to address whatever their particular challenges or opportunities may be. So I think that creates a unique framework by which, if you're measuring, you get what you measure. And if you're measuring success through one's ability to engage and lead in public service, then that's the kind of behavior that you're going to get from folks if they're interested in and committed to this kind of model. So I think that's important, because I've been in other places and seen other places where what we do might be considered just university service or public service, and it might be an afterthought. Here it is front and center as our mission. And I think that's why we've been so successful at creating the collective impact that we've made in the region and the state. Dean Weinberg, anything that you would want to add to that around the educational framework?
That's pretty comprehensive. I mean, we don't have an undergraduate degree, which is a challenge for those of you at universities, which is a challenge because that's the major income source for universities. But we integrate, we have undergraduate scholars programs from across the university, and all of our program partnerships and teams and all the stuff that we do externally is the students are part of the project team. So, I mean, that's an incredible learning experience. Going forward. It overwhelms us a little bit because we have something like 150, 200 students from across campus that are working on that. Well, another concept of the partnership is that, and this is where I think many organizations, whether the universities or governmental entities at the state or local or federal level, is we really, from a strategic perspective, one of the things that the partnerships bring us, and this is an example of multiple things, including the executive MBA program, is that we don't really, there are a lot of internships that we don't run the internship. We run the internship through a large organization. In Central Ohio, there's a gigantic nationally known planning organization called MORPC, which is Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. And we really run an internship program through them. They run the program and they place it with their 72 local governments and other kinds of issues. They also help us recruit for our Executive Leadership Institute and also for the MPA program. So it's not just a partnership in relationship to we're working together to solve an issue. It's a partnership in terms of how we actually operate as an entity, right? And I think that's really what more and more of these units are doing. There were some. This was through an ASPA ad. I was a member of ASPA for a long time. Usually there are a lot of university, but a lot of federal, state employees. And this is where I think a lot of the universities are going and are already there in terms of how they deliver higher education and that quality going forward. So,
so again, if you have questions, you can certainly put them in the chat, but a few folks are direct messaging me questions. So here's another one. You've done a great job talking about partnerships with local governments, state governments, federal governments. Can you talk about your relationship with foundations? How are you partnering with foundations to create change? So, Dean Weinberg, you want to take a shot at that first? Or you want me to?
Okay. Well, I'll give it a great example. So, we have a foundation in the region. We have community foundations in Athens County. We have the Athens County Foundation. So, I was just on a meeting yesterday, and one of the things we're doing is we're working with them to develop a social impact fund and a social impact program, because that's another one of the components we have. We also now have for the last 10 or 15 years, a foundation for Appalachian Ohio, which is all 29 or 32 counties. So we actually do multiple projects with them. So I'll give an example of that. We get money, we've gotten money historically from the Appalachian Regional Commission. And so two of the programs we have are sort of what's called a makerspace program from multiple counties in the region. And then another one is social enterprise. So we actually jointly run the programs with those foundations. As a matter of fact, so that they're become a pretty close partner in terms of we're looking at how you combine foundation assets and our assets and other partners to advance the region. So it's a long history of working with that foundation. We have a foundation that's focused on environmental sustainability called the that we've actually worked with for 15 years on different kinds of things like stream restoration. So that's been an important component of partnerships for us. The challenge in the region that we do work with some state foundations is that the foundations here they're not funded anywhere near the level of you would have in a large metro area.
One thing I would also note about foundations is I mentioned that we have a strong relationship with US EDA and a historic success in receiving funding there. About 3 or 4 years ago, EDA funded us on a technical assistance project to further refine a methodology for calculating social return on investment. And so my colleagues, and I was part of that project, but my colleagues really are the leads on it. We have taken the social return on investment model, and we've begun to use that for nonprofits as well as foundations to figure out what's their social return on investment. So there's a financial return clearly as it relates to some activities, but there can also be a social return that you can attempt to monetize. So for example, if you keep someone from in home ownership, if you keep children in school, whatever it may be, you keep someone from going back to prison, if you can reduce recidivism. So there are social returns to many of these activities, and so trying to calculate what those social returns will be. So it's a very interesting a way to look at this. So I do see a quote or question here from Valerie. Yeah, Valerie, that would be great. I'm very familiar with David Matthews and the Kettering Foundation and a lot of your work on democracy. I know you all published a book around how to make democracy work some time ago. I actually read that book, so I'd love to engage with you offline. There's probably a lot of intersection and opportunities there.
That sounds great, Jason. And we have some new books, so we can add to your reading pleasure.
So that sounds wonderful. So we'll follow up with you offline, and I'm glad that you were able to join us, and I'm glad that we got a question about foundations, because it's clearly an area where we're engaged in as well. I think a lot of the principles we talked about relate to the work that many folks on the call are doing about how do we engage communities, how do we give the communities voice. I describe the work that we do, and this may even relate a little bit to what Valerie does with the Kettering Foundation. I think of it as not to get too academic, but the Venn diagram, and we sort of know what we know, and then communities know what they know with their tacit knowledge, and that sweet spot's that overlap, and that's really the place where we can affect change, but also how do we grow the overlap by helping communities have a greater understanding of their opportunities, and then how do we grow the overlap by us also understanding more about the communities where we live and we work. And so for anyone else who's on the call, we are always interested in sharing the work that we're doing. As you can tell, we're excited about it. We don't know everything, and we won't profess to know everything. There are always new things to learn and new partners and opportunities to seek. And so we're always open to that and love to hear follow-up from folks going forward. So I don't see any other questions or comments in the chat or in the direct message. Dean Weinberg, do you want to have the final word here?
The final word? Okay. That's interesting. I think, well, we're all dealing with challenging times, to say the least, like 100 years of history in the last 2 years. So I think it's very important whether this is where you need foundations, government, and university leadership to help the communities and the citizens of our communities and states and regions work through lots of very difficult issues. And so I guess the final word would be is that one of the reasons we named the school after Senator Voinovich was that opening statement about what's our responsibility, and that's really to make a difference in the lives of people, whether you're a foundation, a local government leader, a nonprofit leader, state or federal. And I think we have a big challenge, but we have a huge opportunity to reassert the importance of public service and broadly defined commitment. Whether it's with the business, government, nonprofit.
Thank you, Dean Weinberg. I said I would give you the last word, but I guess I probably should finish with a housekeeping note. Again, if you join late, we will be sending this recording out to you, so you will be able to chat with us. I'm sorry, be able to see that recording. I am going to put in my email in the chat as well. So feel free to shoot me an email if you like, and I'll be happy to get back with you. I do hope that we have an opportunity to connect with folks on the webinar going forward. It's always nice to meet people from Ohio and around the country who are interested in this type of engagement, not just around economic development and entrepreneurship, but more broadly around how do we engage and help the communities where we're working. Particularly those places, again, like Appalachia and others that are underserved and often underrepresented in the broader economy. So thank you so much for your time. And and Dean Weinberg is noting here real quick, and I'll mention this. For our public affairs schools partners, we have for the last 3 years, and I think we're our fifth year. Okay, for the last 4 years, this is our 5th year, engaged in something called the Voinovich Innovation Challenge at NASPA. And NASPA is an annual conference that NASPA is an organization, but they have an annual conference that takes place in October. And we have given awards for innovative approaches, and it's had a different theme every year to public affairs schools or universities. Sometimes they're not always in public affairs schools, engaged in some sort of innovative approach to address challenges. This year's challenge, we are giving a monetary award through a competitive process at NASPA for communities that are engaged, for schools that are engaging in innovative approaches to helping underserved and underrepresented communities. So it's not public yet, but we have 3 great universities with very innovative programs that are going to be competing in the challenge. So please keep an eye out for that. If you're at a university and you're interested in submitting something for the challenge, again, the deadline has passed for this year, but for next year at NASPA, it's an annual event. It's always a lot of fun, and we get a lot of creative ideas. And I just mentioned, as an aside, for people who are in Ohio, they may particularly appreciate this. The University of Montana won the challenge several years ago for an innovative approach. Montana is, of course, a huge state in terms of landmass. They have many students who take courses but can't always get to the main campus at the University of Montana. And so they have a robot that they bought. They have one, and there's a prototype, and they wanted to buy another one. So someone can virtually control the robot, move the robot around in the classroom as if you're there physically. And they won the challenge and used those dollars to purchase a new robot for the class, which they named George after George Voinovich. So we thought that was a very touching tribute that they did to Senator Voinovich. I know he had a great sense of humor, so he would have gotten a big kick out of that there's a robot named George running around the University of Montana in their public administration courses, so students can attend virtually. And as Dean Weinberg said, we've had about 30 or 40 participants. University of Maryland was our first winner for their Do Good campus, which is a phenomenal and well-funded initiative to engage in the kinds of activities that we're talking about. So thank you to everyone. We look forward to some follow-up offline from you, and we really appreciate your interest and engagement with us today over the lunch hour, and look forward to seeing many of you soon. So thank you very much.